Hello. Today we're looking at an important topic, how people in Africa resisted British colonisation. Now, thinking about the two maps we looked at last time, it might be tempting to think, because the continent was divided up so quickly between all the European powers, it might be tempting to think that the people who lived there didn't put up much of a fight, that they just kind of let it happen. But nothing could be further from the truth. In every corner of Africa, people fought back against the European invasion that was taking place, and they tried to maintain their independence, often against vastly more technologically advanced armies. And we're going to be looking at three case studies today of where people in Africa resisted the invasion by the British. Now, before we look at those case studies, I just want to talk to you about this man here for a second, with the droopy moustache. His name was Lord Lugard. He was a British imperialist, imperialism being this idea that building up empires is a good thing. Now, Lord Lugard certainly believed that. He was the British governor of Nigeria over here in West Africa, when it was part of the British Empire. And he said the people in Africa are naturally subservient to the British. They recognise how superior the British people are, and they just sort of naturally want to become servants as soon as the British arrive. Now, this is plainly rubbish, as we'll see by looking at the examples of people fighting back across Africa. We're not seeing people just bowing down and trying to let the British in and standing aside and wanting to become servants. We're seeing fierce resistance. But it's also interesting for us to think, why would Lord Lugard come up with such utter rubbish as that, and to make such a sweeping statement about a whole continent full of people? We need to remember that racial attitudes have been developing. This is 200 years later than the Barbados Slave Code, when we were looking at the West Indies and slavery going on there. 200 years of racial attitudes on the part of the British developing, and we're really seeing those attitudes becoming more and more entrenched. And that's something that I want us to bear in mind as we move through this African topic. But the three case studies that you're going to be looking at are one in Nigeria, the Igbo War, and then two in southern Africa, the Zulu War. You might have seen the film Zulu, maybe your parents or grandparents made you watch it at Christmas once. Quite an entertaining film, but very much told from the British point of view of this war. The Zulu people, who are just trying to fight back for their homeland, are kind of presented as just faceless, nameless, emotionless enemies. And then we're going to look at the Ndebele War in modern-day Zimbabwe as well. So the first task is going to be to read the key information about those case studies and to fill in a table. And then I want you to pause this video once you've done that, because we're going to then use the knowledge that you've gained from that to complete the next task. So pause the video now, complete those tasks, and then we'll come back and do an exam question in a second. Okay, so we're going to have a go at an exam question now. I'm going to do an example question for you to show you how it's structured, and then I'm going to give you a slightly different one to do by yourself. So the question here is, compare British settlers in Africa in the late 19th century with Normans in England in the 11th century. Now, it's a long time since we studied them, but hopefully we can drag up some memories about them. In what ways were they similar? So we're not looking for differences here, we're looking for similarities. So let's just have a think and see what we can remember about the Normans and the British settlers in Africa and what might be similar about those. So to start off, both the British and the Normans had relatively small numbers, didn't they? Remember, it was about 20,000 Normans who ended up controlling a country of 2 million people. So there were small numbers. Of course, they both faced resistance. The case studies you've just been learning about in the case of the British, and you know about all the rebellions against William's rule in Norman England. They both wanted to bring in some form of religious change, and both had the backing of the Christian Church in some way. The Pope backed William, and also obviously the religious groups, the missionaries wanted to bring change to Africa. They were both hoping for economic resources, and they both had technological superiority. The British with their Maxim guns, and the Normans, very different technology, but still superior to the technology held by the Anglo-Saxons. They had their cavalry and their archers. So once you've had a think about the sorts of similarities you might be able to find, all you need to do is pick two of those to write about. And I think I'm going to pick the fact they faced resistance, and I'm going to pick the technological advances, the advantages they faced. And then you're just going to do a short paragraph on each one. So, let's make a start. One similarity between the British in Africa and the Normans in England was that both groups faced strong resistance from the people they were trying to conquer. For example, William of Normandy had to deal with rebellions in Exeter in 1068 and the north in 1069. The British army had to fight against the Igbo from 1883 and the Ndebele in the 1890s to gain control of their homelands. And that's enough for that paragraph. I've made my point, the similarity, and then I've given my examples. In my second paragraph, I'm going to write about technological superiority. Due to technological inferiority, the computer crashed the first time I tried this, so let's give it another go. So, another similarity between the two groups, between the British in Africa and the Normans in England, is that both had technological advantages over their enemies. The Normans won the Battle of Hastings because of their, oh, this is a good word, judicious, look it up, maybe it was that caused the computer to crash before, judicious use of archers and cavalry. And the British were able to take over vast areas of Africa using only a few soldiers armed with Maxim guns. And so there you go, you've got your point about the similarity and your example from each group there. So this isn't a full mark answer, but it's a pretty decent answer. It's clear, it's got the two similarities, and it's got examples from both sides. You could go into more detail, but this would get you about 6 marks out of 8. So, now I want you to have a go. This is the question I would like you to have a go at. Very similar. Compare British settlers in Africa in the late 19th century, same as the other question, with English settlers in North America in the 17th century. So we're talking about the people who went over to start up the colonies in North America, Massachusetts, Carolina, Virginia, Pennsylvania, etc. In what ways were they similar? So the same thing, we're not looking for differences here, we just want two similarities. So I want you to think about what you could think about the economic resources maybe they were looking for, or the fact that both sides were looking for economic resources. Again, thinking about resistance, thinking about technology. I'm not going to give you any more ideas than that, actually. I want you to think about it for yourself. So, 2 paragraphs, 2 similarities, examples for each one. Give it a go. This time it would be great if you could submit your work so your teacher could have a look at it. If you don't know your teacher's email address, just send it to inquiries@oldfieldschool.com, and if you can get that in for a week's time, Thursday the 2nd of April, that would be brilliant. I look forward to reading what you've come up with. Good luck with it. Cheerio.